start streaming. Start live. All right, and then we're going to go live. All right. And well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 8 of Step Into the Paranormal. I'm one of your hosts, Dave Seiler, and if you notice, my sidekick is not here. He had a family emergency and could not make it, which very saddening. Everybody knows his wife Ruby. Just keep her in your prayers, and if you look on Paranormal Link, you'll actually see what's going on there. Just keep your eyes out on a Paranormal Inc. page. It's here's our website right below us. And that'll lead you to our Facebook page if you want to go there. You'll see our YouTube site, which this gets posted on, as well as our Facebook page. Become a member. We have a very special announcement coming up in the next couple days. Not going to say much about it other than you might see us on a live show or maybe a show. So we'll leave it at that, but watch for the announcement. Today we have a very, very, very special, beautiful, and talented guest. There's her picture, Miss Dana Mitchell. You guys know her from the show Ghosts of Shepherdstown. Hello, Miss Dana.
Hi, how are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. It's been a long time since I've seen you. Last time I saw you, I was actually in Shepherdstown with my daughter Grace. And
I remember. That was a great day.
You took us on an awesome, awesome, awesome tour of Shepherdstown. She took us into places that never made it to the show, and that basically hooked my daughter on the paranormal.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was majorly appreciated. We went to several graveyards, including the Shepherdstown graveyard, which was never shown on the show that I know of, was it?
No, no.
Yep. So, tell me a little bit about. I know you did season 1 and season 2. They listed you as the historian, but I know you as much more. Tell us a little bit about your background, what you do.
Well, I am interested in everything. I just have a very analytical, researchy type mind, and I have always been interested in the paranormal or the supernatural and metaphysics and the occult, and I've just been studying that for years and years and years because I'm old.
No, you're not old. You're just wise. I love it.
And I had started just a regular guided tour in Shepherdstown. I moved from the D.C. area to Shepherdstown about 2005, and I had always wanted to be a tour guide. I always loved history. My mother worked at the Capitol. In fact, I was nearly born in the elevator at the Capitol in D.C.
Oh, wow.
And I grew up going through running through the marble halls with the statues and the portraits, and I guess I began a love of history and the past from that. So when we got to Shepherdstown, I thought it would be neat to do a historical tour here. And since people like ghost stories and legends and stuff, I would add that in too. And it took me a number of years to get it together because I just didn't want to move to a new town and say, hey, let me tell you people about your town. So I gave myself time to settle in, and I, after several years and a lot of research, I started Shepherdstown Mysteries Walk.
Nice. You go ahead and give a plug for that. How do they get in touch with you on that?
Okay, I'm no longer doing it, but Janet Hughes is the name of the person who is now doing that. I retired, and you can go, I think, on Facebook, Shepherdstown Mysteries Walk, or I think ShepherdstownMysteriesWalk.com, and it's mysteries, plural. Because, and I chose that as a name rather than, something else, because I always liked the phrase, a secret can be told, but a mystery must be experienced.
Definitely. I love it.
So, I have been doing it, and somebody, when the production company came to Shepherdstown interested in doing a series here, somebody gave them my number, and they would call me every so often and ask me a question. What do you know about this building? Or what do you know about, have you ever heard this story? And I would tell them what I knew, and this went on for a good while, maybe a year and a half or so, just hearing from them sporadically. And I thought if they ever did do a show, maybe I'd be listed as a consultant. I really didn't know I was going to be in the show.
Oh, wow.
Until the week they started filming, and they said, okay.
Surprise, by the way.
Yeah, show up at headquarters at 9:30. I'm like, what? Wait, what? So
Love it.
So there I was, and I did so much work. I mean, researching, because I'm very pedantic too. I want to get as much accuracy as I possibly can, and that isn't always easy either, especially in these small towns where, I would say something or something showed up in the show, and then somebody would comment like, well, my great-grandfather told me that it happened this way. Well, just because, your grandfather told you something doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah, we all know what opinions are like, and we all have them, right?
Yeah.
Very good. So, some of the things on the show were wicked wild. Have things calmed down in Shepherdstown since the filming of episode season 2?
Well, there's an unseen world all around us. And, I mean, just about every building here has something, I remember a woman calling me after the show and saying, saying, I used to live in Shepherdstown, and my roommate would start screaming because she said there was somebody sitting on the edge of my bed. Why didn't you all do that story? And I said, well, the building that you lived in, what is its history? She's like, I don't know. I said, well, when was it built? I don't know. Well, who do you think that figure was sitting on your bed? I don't know. I'm like, that's why they didn't do that story.
That's why they didn't do it. I don't know why they didn't do it. Yeah, go figure.
They were kind of looking for people's experiences that had a beginning, middle, and potential for an end.
Right.
Everybody had, doors that would close for no reason, or lights that flickered, or things like that. So my house, which is in the historic district, every building in Shepherdstown was used right after the Battle of Antietam in the Civil War as a field hospital or an infirmary or something to house the wounded. And my house included. And I used to get banging on the doors and banging on the side of the house and banging on the windows all the time. And day and night, bang, bang, bang. And I kind of came to the conclusion, of course nobody was there, and that it was residual energy or some kind of memory energy when they were bringing a wounded person to the house. Okay. And one morning, it was like early Saturday morning, I heard the bang, bang, bang on the door, and my husband said to me, would you tell your ghost to let us sleep? Why? And it never happened again. I mean, it was like very, very frequent. And after he said that, it stopped.
Oh, wow.
And I was kind of sorry that it stopped.
Well,
so, I mean, things, there's an unseen world around us here. I'm still I discovered on my walk with the people I was guiding that I had a knack for getting captured. So I'm still getting photographs and stuff of kind of unexplainable things.
Well, I know when you took Grace and I to the Shepherdstown graveyard, that we actually caught several really cool EVPs that we've posted up. But I mean, those were my first best, or actually probably my best Class A EVPs that I've ever had. I mean, just of saying hellos, saying I'm here, just full acknowledgement.
Well, the neat thing about when I was doing the Mysteries Walk, and I'm sure it continues with Janet, is that people invariably got a photograph, got an EVP, got some otherworldly souvenir that they could take home with them. It was almost, certain. It was like a whale watch. I'd say, I can take you to where the activity happens, but I can't guarantee that a whale's going to show up.
Yep.
But usually they showed up.
Yep. Absolutely. So, I mean, we caught a couple good things out of there, and Mike actually took me over to the high school that I know that they've seen some weird things walking in.
Right.
They've come through a couple times and seen a girl walking in the building after hours, and it's still locked.
Yeah, I've heard those stories, and that like they'd see somebody walking around on the second floor, or all the lights would be on, and there's no explanation for it.
Yeah, you gave a couple real good stories while we were down there. I remember you were telling about the one girl with the racetrack and all that. I mean,
oh yeah.
A lot of people don't know that Miss Dana is not just the historian of Shepherdstown. She's also has a psychic medium background. And she has a wealth of knowledge of Shepherdstown, but also a lot of Maryland. I mean, this is one fantastic lady. If you ever get the chance to talk with her, sit with her, listen to her. She's amazing.
Oh, you're making me blush.
Oh, no, I'm just telling the truth. I mean, but you had Grace. How often can you have a 12-year-old mesmerized by hearing what's going on? So
not often, I would guess.
You just had her. I mean, she still talks about some of the stories you told us, and I welcome you to tell any one of the stories from there that you're welcome to. This is your bullhorn. Go for it.
Well, I guess my favorite story is from the show is about the girl in the river.
Okay.
That one of the local people had been experienced seeing somebody in the river. Well, actually, that wasn't the first time that happened for her. She was kind of plagued by this vision of this young woman in the river.
Okay.
And sometimes the woman was normal looking, and sometimes she was decomposed. Well, when she shared that story with the production company, they asked me if I'd heard about anybody being found in the river, and I'm like, no, but I'll look into it. And evidently, I don't know if it was Lori, I'm not sure who it was, picked up that her name was Elizabeth and that she had been killed by her racetrack loving boyfriend. So I talked to some of the people around here. Did you ever hear the story? Was there ever a body found in the river? Nobody had heard of it. So I started doing research. First, I looked up the history of racetracks in this area, and we do have Charlestown Races and Slots Casino, and that opened in 1930.
Okay.
So then I went on, did research in newspapers of bodies found in the Potomac, and I put in a window of time, 1930, say, through 1960. So I'm going through all these newspaper articles, and there are a lot of people found in the Potomac River, let me tell you. But most of them were like boating accidents, things like that. Okay. But then I found that in 1956, this body was found of a young woman. Now it was about 6 miles south down the river, but she had been in the water for 9 days.
Ooh.
So, and then it was like a story unfolding because I'm looking through these old newspaper articles, and I think it was 10 days later, another young woman is found like 10 miles farther down the river. So, at first, like, they were unidentified. They didn't know how the first one before they found the second one. They thought maybe she had drowned. They had no idea who she was. And then it turns out she and the other girl were friends, and they were from Beltsville and Laurel, Maryland.
Okay.
Well, I'm from Beltsville, Maryland, which just gave me a chill because, like, Beltsville, Maryland is like 80 miles from Shepherdstown, and it would be like if they were from Frederick, Maryland, or Baltimore, Maryland, or some other place like that, it wouldn't have been any big deal. But being from my little spot in the road, Beltsville,
wow,
that just gave me like a chill, and it also made me feel connected to them. I mean, I knew, what they would see when they look out the window. I knew where they shopped. I knew where they would have gone to school. And I got very, very close to this story. And it's a fascinating story. You only saw the tip of the iceberg of it on Goes to Shepherdstown. These two girls, it was June 1st, 1956. They had something in mind because the one told her parents she would be spending the night at the other one's house and vice versa,
okay,
which is very common with teenage girls, I'm just telling you.
Mm-hmm.
So Shelby said she was spending the night with Elizabeth, and Elizabeth said she was spending the night with Shelby. And they were last seen going to a bus stop. They were supposedly going to the movies. And I mean, I know where this bus stop is. I know what movie theater they would have gone to if that's where they were really going. But Elizabeth's brother, and her name was Elizabeth, saw them, a car pull up. They talked to the driver a minute. They got in the car. They talked a few minutes or a minute. they got out of the car and they switched places and got back in the car and drove off. And as they drove off, the man turned and looked at the brother who was across the street or whatever and gave him a really, nasty look, which the brother said he would never forget. And that was the last time they were ever seen. That was the last time anybody heard or knew anything until 9 days later when Elizabeth was found in the Potomac River. So I continued to do research. It's like, well, she was 6 miles down the river from Shepherdstown. So I looked at the weather, and sure enough, around June 1st, there had been heavy rain in this area, and that would have made the current much faster and the river swell. So I really think if she had been dropped in the river in Shepherdstown, she could have been washed down within 9 days to where she was found. Now, or her spirit simply returned to Shepherdstown because it's a college town. There would have been other people her age, and in 1956 there wasn't too much else along the river. So they did. They tried to do an investigation. They looked at the girls' diaries and found that they liked going to racetracks to meet young men.
Oh, wow.
And so even the police speculated, well, they might have been going to Charlestown races because no one could figure out why were they here. It's 80 miles away, and in 1956, before a lot of major highways were built, it probably would have taken as long as 3 hours to get here from Beltsville.
Oh, wow.
So the bottom line is that they don't know why they were here. They don't know why they were killed, and nobody really knows what happened. Trying to make a long story short. Now, several years later, there was a Maryland man who was arrested for killing some people, and they tried to pin every unsolved murder on this guy.
Sure, just throw it all at him, hope to see what sticks.
Yeah. And his name was Melvin Reese, and he's a very interesting character, too. For the crimes that he did commit, he was imprisoned. I think he was supposed to be executed, but then that was stayed, and he died in prison, I think, in the 1990s.
Oh, wow.
But before he died, he confessed to a newspaper reporter, not to the police, but to a newspaper reporter. He said he did kill them. But he didn't provide any kind of information other than what was known in the newspaper. He said he picked them up at a bus stop. Well, everybody knows they were picked up at a bus stop, but he gave no other information after that. So I don't really think he did it. It really wasn't, when you look at the rest of his story, which I don't want to tie up all the time talking extraneous stuff, but it wasn't his method. It wasn't his modus operandi.
Right. It sounded like he was just adding a claim to fame to it.
Right. It wasn't his territory. It just didn't fit. But a lot of people, some people accepted it because they wanted closure. As it was, 9 members of her family came up and visited me. And it was all very familiar because we were all from Beltsville, so it felt, very comfortable to talk to them, and they told their side of the story, how this has kind of been hovering over their family's head for the past 60 years. And now the people I talked to would have been her younger cousins or nieces and nephews, as time went by. But to me, it's just so sad that this was something that never really got explained, never really got solved.
Really, the pain and the sorrow that could linger from that just could be phenomenal, just not only with the family, but from the spirit itself.
Exactly. And yeah, it was just a really interesting story. Why were they here? Why did they die?
Wow.
Now,
that's wild.
Now, Elizabeth seemed to have been dumped in the river somewhere. But Shelby was placed in a little tributary off the river. And from me watching Criminal Minds, yeah, when somebody is placed in a situation, it's more personal.
Right.
So I don't know if the main target was Shelby and Elizabeth was collateral damage or what. Nobody knows.
Now, did they find the method of how they died?
Well, they determined, because that little bone in your throat
right.
Was broken on Shelby, they determined that she was strangled.
Okay.
But Elizabeth was too badly decomposed. They never confirmed the cause of death. They assumed she was strangled simply because Shelby had been strangled.
Okay. Wow. And seeing them down the river like that, especially after a heavy rain, would make sense. There's that, ugh, that just gives me the creepies.
And, a lot of psychics, when I was doing the research on it, and, I felt this close connection. Like I said, it was like, I think the people who got involved with it, like the girl here who saw the apparition, and me getting involved with it, I almost think it was like intentional. It's like they reached out. I don't think they wanted to be forgotten. And they had pretty much been forgotten. Because as I did the research on it and like going through newspapers from newspaper.com, it started the 1st of June, and by the end of June they were buried together in a double funeral, and that was it. There was nothing more, no continued investigation, no, remembering them a year or 5 years later or anything like that. That was just it.
Just one and done. That's ow.
Yeah.
That would be interesting to go back and kind of re-examine some of the evidence, if that could be possible.
Right. Yeah, I just don't know. Now, one of the psychics who I was talking to about it said she was getting a name. She just said Jockey Joe. So I did some research, and actually there was a jockey during that time. He was kind of an up-and-coming jockey, and he was in his early 20s. So, and he did like that whole circuit around there.
Oh, wow.
Oh, of the different racetracks. There was Laurel Racetrack and Bowie Racetrack.
Yep. I'm very familiar. I live right between them, literally.
Yeah.
So.
And I wondered, again, if it was racetrack involved, why were they coming up here? I mean, why didn't they go to, like Pimlico or one of the other racetracks?
Right.
Unless they were coming to see someone specifically.
That would be an interesting just case to follow, just trying to figure out and put all the pieces together at that point.
Yeah. Now, I looked up if Charlestown, when their season started back in 1956, and they opened for the season at the end of June. But I'm sure at the beginning of June, there would have been people there, preparing for the season. So.
Interesting. I mean, that's just like really wild. I mean, because you got my mind turning at this point, because a 3-hour drive, because back in '56, they weren't the mega highways like we know now. 95 wasn't there, all that kind of stuff. So.
Right.
They
would have taken the back road, like Route 29,
yep,
to maybe 40 or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's 2 to 3 hours minimum. That's a long drive, because there and back, so that's a 6-hour day minimum to come and do something.
Yeah.
So who
and
are
the parents, parents didn't know they were missing for 3 days.
Oh,
because
wow.
they thought they were at the other one's house. So they didn't even, call them in as missing persons for 3 days.
Oh, wow. That just gives me the heebie-jeebies. Having 2 daughters myself, not knowing where my daughter is for 3 days, I'd lose what's left of my mind, and it ain't much as it is.
I know.
That's just
wow. The one mother had just had a new baby, so she was probably convalescing, a brand newborn.
Yep.
And I think the other mother, she had a younger child who, poured scalding water on herself and was in the hospital. So they probably the 2 girls were best friends. One was 15 and one was 18. I guess Elizabeth had just turned 18.
Okay.
So they just probably felt that, they were together and everything was all right.
Everything's fine. No.
Yeah. Because back in the 50s, kids were a lot more free range.
Yep. I grew up in the 60s, the 70s in Odenton. I could go 5 miles away from the house and people would know exactly who I am, where I lived, and if I did something wrong, they knew my mom and how to find her.
Yeah.
So.
So you're familiar with this area too.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Elizabeth lived in Beltsville to the east of the railroad tracks. She literally lived on the other side of the track.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah, and down around where Bet's Liquor is, that area.
Yep. Oh Lord.
Yeah, and then Shelby lived in Laurel, just on the other side of. And they would go to Laurel Racetrack and Laurel Raceway to meet guys, and to Fort Meade to meet guys.
I grew up around Fort Meade, right, just south of Odenton. So very much so. I know that whole area.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand. I knew a lot of girls like that who were just trying to meet somebody to maybe get them out of Beltsville.
Yep.
To maybe get them a little better life.
Wow. That's it. That is just a wild story. I mean, that's making my mind turn, but
I think it would make a really good movie or book or something, but I don't have the ability to do that. And of course, I mean, I was condensing it to try to make a long story reasonably shorter, but I mean, because there's a whole lot more little details and things that are just, for example, when the police were trying to determine whether that killer Melvin Reese had done it.
Okay.
They didn't. The brother had said he'd never forget what he looked like, but they never showed him a picture of Melvin Reese.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's.
And then, unfortunately, that brother was killed in an automobile accident in the 1970s.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's just... There's so many things that went wrong in so many places. It makes you think, how precious life is.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, so now that I'm getting the heebie-jeebies, so...
Okay, let's see what else is new. Well, we can talk about, just general stuff in the paranormal world.
Well, one thing I do on every time, because I've talked to Lori, we've talked to Mike, anytime we've talked to anybody from Shepherdstown, I always give Tommy's Pizza a plug. That is the best pizza on the planet.
Yes, Tommy's Pizza.
It's right by the tracks. If y'all ever go to Shepherdstown, first of all, go see Miss Dana, go see Mike, and go see Tommy's Pizza. Good pizza.
I haven't seen Mike in, I can't remember how long.
Really?
I think I haven't seen Mike in a year, or maybe longer.
Oh my God, he's like 20 steps down the road from you. Just
I know.
Say, hey.
I know. I've been hermiting lately. I just kind of, I recently got my bachelor's degree from a metaphysical university at Sedona. So I think, thank you. And I'm ordained. So
nice.
if you know anybody who wants to, needs a officiant,
Will do. I will point him your way.
I got the creds.
Very cool. Very cool. So we took us to a few of the graveyards and to a church. And I remember the corner, the lot of that church, there was a tree. And we got some good evidence there. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that church is probably the oldest church building in West Virginia. It was the original church of the town, and we call it the Old English Church. It's no longer a church. Somebody lives in it. But the adjoining graveyard, and you know the difference between a graveyard and a cemetery.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, a graveyard is the burial grounds of a churchyard, so this is technically a graveyard.
Okay.
The adjoining graveyard is still owned and maintained by the Episcopal Church. Okay. Now, years ago, and I was taking one of these courses in psychic development, and one of the assignments was go to a graveyard and see if you can connect with someone there. Well, I didn't want to do that. It sounded kind of greebly to me, so I put it off, and then finally said, well, I'll go over there. So I went over there and said, is there anybody who wants to talk to me? And I got this a boy, and I said, what's your name? And he said, Connor. I said, what are you doing here? He said, I like it here. I said, well, where's your family? And he said, everyone else has gone on, but I wanted to stay. And sure enough, there's a little gravestone there of a boy named Joseph Connor. He died in 1815, and he was 10 years old. And next to him, there's 4 other little graves that are children's graves, but the markings have all been worn away. In fact, he prefers to be called Connor over Joseph. Connor's tombstone is weathered a whole bunch since the first time I connected with him.
Nice.
So after that, I brought another psychic friend of mine into the graveyard. I don't tell her anything in advance, but as soon as we stepped in, she said, there's a little boy here. He wants to know if I've come to play. She said, I told him no, and he said, everyone else has gone on, but I wanted to stay. The exact words that I had heard.
Wow.
And I don't give myself, I always doubt myself. Oh, I'm just making that up in my head. But since it was the exact thing that gave me, affirmation and confirmation.
Yep.
But he also told her he didn't want to have to be born again. Now, I mean, is that a reference to reincarnation? I don't know. And she said, I just say what I hear. I don't try to interpret it. But that was what he said to her. Now, since then, I've had a number of conversations with Connor. Sometimes he'll talk to me. Sometimes he won't. Sometimes he likes to, toy with you, just tease, sort of.
Right.
By not cooperating.
He's a kid. He's allowed to do that.
Yeah. But so many people that have since come in there have reported having contact with him. Now, when I first told this story about him with my tour group, a woman stepped forward. She lived locally in the town. And she said, I used to bring my dog over here, and one time I threw a ball, and the ball came rolling back to me. And I thought, I'll add that to my stories. And then another woman on another walk came forward, and she said she and her roommate had come over here with their dogs, and the ball came back to him, and also her dog kept sitting there looking like he was looking at something. So I had a grouchy old dachshund. Bless his heart, I miss him. I thought, well, I'll bring Fraser over there. He wasn't too friendly with live people. I didn't know how he would be with dead people, but I'd see what he'd do. So I brought Fraser over there. Now, Fraser had a thing. You'd throw a ball, and Fraser would run like a bullet to the ball, get the ball, but instead of bringing it back to you, he would just run off in another direction.
Good fetch.
Yeah. He's a dachshund, by the way. And so I threw the ball, and Frazier ran like a bullet, got to the ball, and sat down. Just sat there.
Okay.
So I went over, picked up the ball, threw the ball. Frazier ran like a bullet, just sat there. Didn't pick it up or run off with it like he normally did. So we did that 5 times, and that was his reaction. So as we were leaving, of all the tombstones in the cemetery, in the graveyard, that Frazier could have left his calling card on.
Oh, jeez.
He pees on Connor's tombstone.
Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez. I bet you Connor's sitting there going, thanks, dog. Appreciate it, you know?
Well, Connor had never, we have to realize he died in 1815. There were a lot of things that he didn't see or know the words for. Like, he thought he'd seen dachshunds before, because that's one of the reasons I think he liked to stay, is that his life wasn't very fun when he was alive,
Right.
for whatever reason. But he sees a lot of people in the town. They come with their dogs. There's cats. There's a little girl spirit that comes in there. I call her the free range spirit because she's seen all over the place, and that plays with him. He likes young ladies, but he doesn't understand why they dress the way they do. I mean, can you imagine? Back in 1815, a girl dressed in shorts and a tank top. I mean,
yeah. I mean, they have the full bustles, the hoop skirts, the full.
Yeah.
And now today they come up with barely the spaghetti on, and it's like, yeah.
Yeah, he just doesn't understand that, or these women in pants. But I mean, he just observes everything, and like. One person I know was trying to talk to him, and she said, "I'm from Chicago," and he said, "Where's Chicago? Or what's Chicago?"
Chicago, geez. Yeah.
And just different things like that are there. I came by with a group once, and there was another paranormal group. A lot of paranormal groups come to that particular graveyard to train their new people that have recently joined them,
Okay.
Because it's been very active, and a lot of pictures and captures have been gotten there. So he came up and introduced himself, and I said, "Have you all picked up anything of a little boy here?" And he said, "Oh, you mean Connor?"
Ah!
Yeah, we communicate.
Nice.
He said, we can communicate with Connor all the time.
I love the affirmation. When you have one
Yeah.
party and another party and another party, and the affirmation behind it.
Right. And he seems to like to hang around that particular tree. He doesn't really hang around his grave. He hangs around this larger tree. And people leave him presents. They leave him toys. They leave him candy. Now, there's a woman who works that cemetery like it's her job. She comes, 10 miles from Hagerstown, and she plants flowers and she weeds, and she does it. She has ancestors buried there.
Okay.
But so I asked him once. I said, "What do you prefer? Do you prefer candy or treats or toys?" And he said, "I prefer toys, but the lady always takes them away." So.
Oh, jeez. Well, next time I come down, I'll bring a few things for him. So I know definitely that we've got to come down there again. I mean, you just Grace never stops talking about you.
Uh-huh.
Hey, Dad, do you remember when we went? Dad, do you remember what? Yes, I remember.
Aww.
Yeah. So.
She's the sweetest thing. Did I take you to the Catholic burial grounds at the end of High Street?
You did. You took us to the place where the tree was, and you took us to the right over by Connor. You took us to the Shepherdstown Cemetery. I'm sitting here and you took us to one other place that was another cemetery.
Well, I mean, that let's see, there's several cemeteries and graveyards in Shepherdstown. There's a Lutheran one, there's the Christ Reformed Church, but at the western end is a burial ground that they pretty much dumped the cholera victims, the Irish canal workers.
Okay.
You know, the C&O Canal runs right along the Potomac, and Shepherdstown's actually the only West Virginia town that has a lot named for it. So the cholera epidemic went right down when they were building the C&O Canal in around 1832, 33. And the canal workers here were Irish. And they were just dumped in like mass graves. Before the Revolutionary War, the only church allowed in the town was the Church of England.
Okay.
Any other denomination had to be outside the town limits. So that's where I guess the Catholic, there had been a Catholic chapel there or something at one time. And that was outside the town's limits at the time. So that's where they just took them and dumped them. So it's not like there's graves, like a graveyard. It's just kind of rolling hills. But I have gotten a lot of response there from the spirits there, and people have gotten EVPs. And I don't know if I took you there or not. I mean, to look at it, it's not much to see. But if you've got ways of connecting, it's an interesting tale. Their spirits just seem to be hanging around there, doing what Irish canal workers did, just kind of being rowdy and drinking. They have like a spokesperson that will cuss you out in Gaelic and English and ask you.
I'm Scottish, Irish, and German by heritage, so I very much understand.
Yeah.
So we went to, all right, so as you pass over the tracks and Tommy's Pizza's on your right, there's a church right after that on the right.
That was the Christ Reformed Church and graveyard, and across of that was the old Lutheran graveyard.
Yep, and that's where Grace and we went to both of them, and then Grace and I walked through them. Mike said, go over there, you're going to find some good stuff. In the one across, the one on the left, Grace put my K2 meter on top of one of the tombstones, and it was literally just pegging out right in the middle of a graveyard.
Yeah.
And we couldn't explain it. I mean, how do you get an electrical activity right in the middle of a graveyard with no electric lines?
Yeah. That used to be a really active graveyard, and there was a fence around it that I think kept a lot of things contained.
Okay.
But there was a snowstorm a couple years ago, that knocked down the fence, and some of the more nastier residences kind of got loose. But when we were filming Ghost of Shepherdstown, Nick Goff asked me what was the most active place I knew of. So I took him to that cemetery, and we got a number of EVPs that were kind of alarming. Like, one of the producers asked the question, what happens after you die? And the EVP we got was this kind of evil laugh. It went like, really put a chill down your spine. And then we asked it what it was, and it said it was a demon. Now, I think, too, spirits on the other side don't necessarily tell the truth. I think some of them want to scare you.
Okay. I've actually run into a spirit over at Haldeman Mansion, and it was quite humorous because the spirit, we kept getting words like on an obvious, demon, kill you. And we know that we know of one issue that actually happened there, and I'm not going to say it because we've had a lot of psychic mediums say the same thing. But we were upstairs, and it seemed like something was trying to scare us. And we said, look, if you want us to leave, we'll happily listen. Just tell us leave. The next word that came on the obvious was, please leave.
Yeah, Yeah,
We said,
well,
okay, that's all I had to say. We're leaving. And so we're packing up, and just before Ernie turned off his Ovilus, you see the word thanks come across. We were just standing there. We got downstairs, and we're like, did that just happen?
well, I know at the graveyard we were just talking about, one of the young women who's a student at Shepherd at the time, they spent the night there.
No.
And she got an EVP that very clearly said, please leave.
Yeah.
So, and it was also, now at the time, they've since built a housing development right behind it, so they've kind of altered the terrain a little bit. But at the time, there was just one way in and one way out. And the police chief, this is the one before Mike, was sitting down there, and it was like 1 a.m, and he saw a black town car pull into that cemetery. And he thought, well, this is, it's 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, what's going on
there? And so he followed it, and it was gone. When it just like, there was nothing in there.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, my mother-in-law, God bless her, she used to scoff at me and laugh at me for kind of doing what I'm doing. And apparently the story she told me when she came back, it was either Gettysburg, it was one of the battlefields. She went somewhere, and they had this maze there. And she got kind of twisted up in the maze. So she saw one of the Revolutionary soldiers in uniform, and she thought, okay, he's going to know his way out, and followed him.
Oh.
Came around a corner, and it was a dead end with a graveyard in it. There was a grave plot in the actual maze, and it was one of the soldiers that had fallen. She came home to me that day and said, Dave, I will never mock you again.
Yeah, I think I've finally convinced my husband, who was totally skeptic, but I've gotten so many pictures and things that you can't explain, and of course the banging on the door and the walls, and I think he's coming around. Now another thing, these things happen and you don't think anything about it, but like there was a spot across the street from me in the area, right directly across from my house. And every time I would walk by there, from time to time, I would smell horses. Not fertilizer, but horses.
Right.
And I wouldn't think anything about it. I have horses. And then one day, and I was taking my tour group, and I smelled it, and I'm like, do you all smell horses? And they were like, yeah. I'm like, there's no horses here. So, and it was like, that just dawned on me. Why would I be smelling horses there when there hasn't been horses there probably, in 100 years?
Oh, yeah. Oh. See, Ernie has a really interesting horse story. I mean, he was in Gettysburg, and you know how when you hear a horse and buggy coming by with their feet hitting concrete, you can hear them?
Yeah.
He was standing there actually with another couple he didn't know that were just waiting across the street, and they heard it coming by, so they actually took a step back. They heard it go by in front of them, and there was nothing there.
Wow.
So, absolutely. I mean, we all have spirits, we all have souls, and, if you're doing what you're doing, you may not even know you're dead.
Yeah.
So.
Well, my father didn't know he was dead. It took him about a year to cross over.
Oh, wow.
He died suddenly. He was 86 years old, and he was driving on Wisconsin Avenue in Washington, D.C., which is a pretty, busy street.
Yep.
And he must have felt something happening because he was able to pull over to the side of the road. But that was the last thing he did. And, I mean, it was a good Samaritan who called in, 911. And I'm an only child, and my mother had already passed on, so I had to do everything.
Right.
And so he had minor heart problems. He took like glycerin tablets. I guess he had like angina, but he had never had like a heart attack or anything before. But he must have just had a big bang, and at least he was able to pull over to the side of the road. So his funeral arrangements and everything was a flurry of strange and unusual events, but I'll save that and continue with this story. A couple months after he had died, my daughter had a dream about him, and in the dream he didn't know he had died, and they were having a conversation, and she's like, "Yes, Granddaddy, we had a funeral for you and everything," and he was very incredulous. And so a couple months after that, I had a dream about him, and he didn't know he had died. And I'm like, yes. And I was remembering my daughter's dream in the dream. I guess these were lucid dreams. I said, yes. I said, where are you? And he didn't know. It was like it never dawned on him. I said, what are you doing? What have you been doing? Where have you been? And he was like, I don't know. I'm just, and I asked him if he had talked to my mother, or seen my mother, rather, and he said, no, but I hear her. So, about 6 months after that, my cousin went to a medium down in southern Maryland, trying to contact her grandmother, who was my father's sister.
Okay.
And the medium kept saying to her, there's a man trying to get through. There's a man trying to get through. He has a message for his daughter. And she described him, and my cousin said, well, that sounds like Uncle Hank. And she said, well, he wants her to know that he just got crossed over. He's crossed.
Oh, wow.
And a woman who plays piano helped him. Well, my mother played piano, and also my grandmother played piano. So, but she told him it was a woman who played piano who helped him cross over. And then he had some things to tell me, which were things that, not even my cousin knew, much less this medium.
Okay.
So, and one of it was, when my father passed, my father was a Mason, Freemason. He always wore his Masonic ring.
I don't know, you're not seeing the camera, but I'm actually holding up. I have a tattoo on my arm. I am a Blue Mason from the Blue Lodge. I'm a Mason myself from the Blue Lodge.
Oh,
yep.
Well, he always wore his ring. Always wore his ring. But when I was arranging for the funeral arrangements, couldn't find it. And looked all over, asked all over. Everyone's like, he always wore that ring, and couldn't find it. So we had to go through with the services without it. But an interesting thing about the service, like I said, I'm the only child. I made all the arrangements.
Yep.
When I went into the funeral home for the first time after they prepared him and everything, he had a Mason's apron on. And I'm like,
yes.
Who did this?
Yep.
How did they know?
Yep. That's all you gotta say, because I actually have there's one for me that's actually in my closet. Both my daughters know about it as well.
Well, I don't know who did that or who would have done that or how it was done, because I was doing all the arrangements. But it's like, huh. And I had a Masonic ceremony done for him.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, all you have to do is tell one of the brothers, and they will make sure an apron goes on.
Well, one of the messages that my father said through the medium, if that's who it was he wanted to know if I found the ring.
Now, did you find it?
Actually, I did, and that was another weird thing. I was cleaning out my father's apartment. He had 86 years of stuff he'd put into this apartment. Wow. And, it took me a month, and, people helping me, and goodwill, and relatives. Still, it was a massive job. So one day I'm cleaning it, and out of exhaustion, I just plop down on the sofa, and something catches my eye and my peripheral vision.
Okay.
And I look, and my mother had collected carousel horses, and there was a carousel horse sitting there on the coffee table, and on the foot of the carousel horse was his ring, and it was it was going back and forth.
Awesome. He wanted you to find that. You know that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, it was weird because he always kept his jewelry by his bedside in a box.
Yep.
He wasn't likely to take it off and just hang it on a ornament.
Yep.
But it was on the upraised foot of this carousel horse, just swinging back and forth.
Yep. Knowing what I know about Masons and how we treat the stuff, he absolutely wanted you to find that.
Yeah.
The daughter is unless you have a son that you can pass your ring to, the daughter is allowed to wear it around her neck on a chain.
Oh, okay.
So you can't pass it to anybody else other than your first daughter.
Yeah.
So them's the rules.
Okay, thank you. Good to know.
Definitely. So we're running low on time here. So tell me what you're doing these days.
I'm giving classes in metaphysics, and I may be involved in another television project, which I can't say anything about.
Understood.
But yes, it's good. Keep your eyes on the television. You never know when I might pop up.
Definitely.
So that's all I can say about it.
No, definitely. Yep, I understand now. We've got very soon an announcement coming out in a similar way ourselves. So,
but I want to thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed it. I hope my rambling was of some interest.
No, we love you. That's why we wanted you here. I love your stories, and I've been bragging to Ernie because he's so jealous because he wasn't there the day I came down. So he's been jealous the whole way through. He's like, "We got to get her on the show. We got to get her on the show." I'm like, "I know we do." So, and then
anytime you come to Shepherdstown, give me a call.
Will do, definitely.
I'll be glad to take you anywhere.
Definitely. Sweetie, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on to our show. And, you're part of Paranormal Inc., so if you ever want to post any of your stuff up there, how people can find you, how they can take your classes, you're welcome to.
Okay, well, thank you.
Big hugs, lots of love, and thank you again. And we're going to sit here and do our ending. It's going to, let me see if I can hit the right button here.
You've been listening to Step Into the Paranormal with Ernie Atwell and David Seiler. Thank you for listening, and listen in next week for another topic and more great guests, right here on WLDB Radio Network.